All right, now this is a story you haven't heard much about, but I'm going to ask a question. You got to think about it. Is China hindering free speech on American soil? How can that be? Well, Wang Dan, who's a former leader of the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests and founder of an independent think tank that promotes democratic reforms in China, says the Chinese Communist Party is extending its surveillance of critics abroad, reaching into Western academic communities and silencing visiting Chinese students here. Through a campaign of fear and intimidation, Beijing is hindering free speech in the United States and in other Western countries on college campuses. We have enough problem with free speech on college campuses. Now we got it from China. Joining us now for analysis from Florida is Stephen Mosier, a China expert and author of Bully of Asia. And here with me in Washington, Shirkan Ali Khan, who's a graduate student at Catholic University and a spokesperson for persecuted Chinese civil rights activist Gwen Guangcheng. Let's start with you, Steve. You've been covering China for years. I know none of this is surprising to you. I think a lot of Americans, however, are shocked to know that Red China, and yes, I still call them that, Red China has such a long arm into the U.S. academic community. Tell us how they're intimidating speech on campus.
Well, Laura, it has a long arm into the U.S. academic community. The arm is getting longer all the time. I'm kind of the poster child for the persecution by China of American academics and American students who criticize the Chinese regime for human rights. You recall we've talked before about my reporting on forced abortions in China, which led the Chinese government to demand of Stanford, demand, not ask, that I be expelled from the university, and Stanford complied. That was a long time ago. China is larger and more powerful today than it was then. It is much more active in suppressing speech.
Yeah, they have more money. They have a lot more money. And Shirkan, specifically, what's happening on the college campuses?
So college students, most of them come from the white-collar class in China, and most of those people are employed by the Chinese state-owned enterprises. And those students feel pressure when they're here in the States to self-censor. They know that their social media is monitored, and that has a very strong chilling effect.
So I was looking at a chart, I think the Wall Street Journal did it, of the number of Chinese students in 2000, come to the United States in 2000, versus today. And I believe the number today was over 500,000 in the United States. Does that sound right to you? I think that
I've seen at least over 350,000.
The chart goes like this.
Yes,
the bar graph. Oh, there it is.
Correct.
So you got to see it there. It's on the right. Thank you.
Yes.
So there we go. So it's on the right. That's where we are essentially today, at top.
Yeah.
A lot of Chinese students here. More surveillance through social media, more pressure on the upper class, especially Chinese, to abide by the communist dictates. Now, does this happen in pressure on their families at home? Does this happen in subsidies being removed, educational subsidies? And then how does it spill over into the other parts of campus?
Yeah, well, it's a very sophisticated strategy where they monitor social media. And they know that they have, they up the pressure where the students know that they might get a call from their parents saying someone from the government came to visit us, or their parents might be employed by a bank, which is also owned by the government. Or if they really step out of line, the government would actually imprison their family.
How do we allow this, though? I mean, this is, Stephen, I got to go back to you on this. This is shocking to most people, because we are a free country. We hear about Russia collusion, Russia's attempt to, supposed collusion with Trump, which is ridiculous, and the attempt to influence our election. I'm sure they probably did. But what about this? This is China's attempt through setting up all these Confucian institutes, Chinese studies at universities. Some of them are cool, I imagine. But boy, they have an enormous amount of power and money operating right now in the United States for a purpose. They have a purpose. What's behind that purpose?
Well, behind that purpose is the idea of controlling all discussion, all debate about China. And they've set up hundreds and hundreds of Confucian institutes around the country. And they go to a college or university, offer them millions of dollars in return for room on campus, so the institutes are on campus. They're named, of course, after Confucius and not, say, Chairman Mao Zedong, who's one of the great mass murderers of human history, having murdered 65 million people. But there are certain things that are not allowed to be talked about at the Confucian Institute. You can't talk about the 3 Ts, they're called. You can't talk about Taiwan. You can't talk about Tibet. You can't talk about Tiananmen. You can't talk about Taiwan because Taiwan is free. Tibet wants to be free.
They shut it down. They do the same thing in Hollywood. There's certain movies aren't going to be made. Google, Facebook, all shut out. We're going to do a lot more on this. Thank you both for joining us.